Are we good? Yes,
Everybody,
I see a lot. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when you watch this. Welcome everyone to our weekly patient advocacy quick chat. We try to keep them to 10 minutes. We've never made we've never made it yet, but today I've got the clock ticking. We're going to give it a go. I'm Dr. Andrea, pharmacist with 30 years experience that has expanded into patient advocacy. With me, my co-host, Kevin Walker, co-founder of RPH Ally. He's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and today we are going to chat a little bit about patient advocacy subspecialties, for lack of a better word. We're going to focus on the pharmacist aspect of it. And it's really based on conversations that I've had with pharmacists looking for other opportunities. And it really made me think about how we as pharmacists approach change, new opportunities, and what's out there for us. So, Kevin, yeah, have you met? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of pharmacists who are patient advocates, and vice versa.
yeah,
Have you met folks that asked about this?
quite a few, Andrea, and usually they just don't know where to start. They don't know like what their skill sets are and how it matches up overall and how they incorporate it into their overall workflow. And so that has been the main questions that I've gotten over time. And then also when it comes to specialties, like they sometimes feel like they need to have more knowledge, like they need more insights on billing, they need more insights on transitions of care, those types of things.
Yeah, and that's the same type of those are the same concerns that I hear from folks. Broadly speaking, and you and I we've talked about this before. Within the advocacy space, yes, there is a board certification that anyone can take for patient advocacy. When I say anyone, it is basically around people that have healthcare experience or healthcare. I don't want to say healthcare providers specifically because there's a criteria that you have to go through, apply to take the exam. So there is board certification for patient advocates. However, an advocate could be an attorney, it could be a physician, pharmacist. It could also be someone like a certified nursing assistant who has gone and had some specialty training, maybe as a death doula, maybe as somebody who knows more about transitions of care. And so when folks, the general public, is searching for advocates, they're looking at criteria that kind of meets their needs. Well, if we really think about that, I have a profile on a national advocacy board. Within that, when it asked me, like, what do I bring to the table? As a pharmacist, obviously I understand drug therapy, but I'm not focused on MTM, or medication therapy management or comprehensive medication reviews. I understand the drugs, but it's much more of a TSA approach. If I see something, I say something. But navigating the healthcare system, and so as I went through, there are things like, do you have experience with specific diseases? Do you have experience within, like you said, specific settings? And so I think with pharmacists, for this conversation, I want to kind of back it up, look at it high level, drill down, and then just talk about what some of those limiting thoughts are and how truly, when you look at it the way I do, I'm like, that's not limitation. That's freaking opportunity, man. Hang that shingle.
Yes, I'm 1,000% with you. I think the other group, Andrea, is pharmacy technicians. Like I've worked with pharmacy technicians that have an incredible background and skill set inside the space. It would be incredible patient advocates. In fact, a few of them that I've known, that's what they do in their communities. They're just doing it for free. Like they didn't, make it into a career pathway.
Exactly. And, when I think of the pharmacy tech, I actually know a board certified patient advocate who's not a pharmacist, but was a business manager of a pharmacy. And so she knew all the behind the scenes of contracting with insurance companies and what that looks like. And so, I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity. So I think, again, pharmacists, we get a little myopic thinking it has to be clinically driven. And it doesn't. For a pharmacy tech, if you're the one that spends all that time on prior authorizations and your community's insurance backs up, inside and out,
Yeah.
you could hang a shingle, dare I say, as long as you're practicing within the scope of whatever your state county allows, you could run that business and focus up maybe on that narrow subset. And so, let's talk a little bit about that just to close up. what I'm thinking of. And so 2 conversations came to mind over the past, let's just call it 6 months. Can't remember exactly when I met them, but I've met 2 pharmacists who were intrigued by advocacy. One has a chronic illness now, and looking at the space is not sure if the traditional work of 40, 50 hours a week is going to be aligned, but because they have this chronic illness, they know a lot about that chronic illness. And so they do a lot of, like you said, free community advocacy already, and are looking at, what are my opportunities? The other one had a transition from one work environment that had removed her from a clinical experience, spent decades in a very focused aspect, and now is looking for, that later in life, don't really want to go back behind the bench, don't blame her. And yet, what can I bring to the table? And in each conversation, as I talk to these folks, I'm just amazed at the skill set that they have that they're not counting. And so in one case, somebody's primary language isn't English, it happens to be Chinese. Well, let's be real. How many folks, when you look at advocates, dual language, bilingual advocates, they're out there, but this is not a large, there's not that many advocates in the first place. So if we think of bilingual, and then you narrow it down into, say, Chinese, oh, and by the way, a family member has a chronic illness. I mean, you start niching. And so me, being someone who has a business and is looking for opportunity, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how many people out there are living that life who could benefit from what you bring? Very similar for the other person. And so when I talk to pharmacists who are looking at advocates, I really, I kind of do like the thought bubble. Have you ever done a thought bubble stick figure? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if you aren't familiar with the thought bubble, you make a stick figure and you put a certain number of thought bubbles around your head, 8, 10, whatever. And then you fill in all the bubbles with things that make you feel alive, that energize you, right? And so for me, it was, I'm a pharmacist, background in long-term care, board certified in geriatrics, got it. But I'm also a sailor, a diver, a world traveler, lived overseas, interested in, and then you just fill it in. And then, again, in business, I sit there and go, okay, so where's the intersection of all this? I attend a Buddhist temple, so I have a background on something that's not, I have, was raised in a Christian environment, but now I go to a Buddhist temple. And so I have, a broader experience out there. And so when I was looking at building my advocacy business, I was like, oh, yeah, obviously, folks that are over 55, chronic illness, and yet I can also bring in travel coaching. I can bring in, end of life practices that might not be what many people have heard of,
What I'm hearing, Andrea, is that in terms of specialties, like sometimes we think of specialties as being like, are you a specialist with insurance? Or are you a specialist with transitional care? Are you a specialist with medication? Are you a specialist with legal documentation? But you're saying like we can even refine down to other subspecialties of what are your skill sets or what is your background that can now allow you to connect with the patients you're serving, like the languages you speak or the experiences you've had or the cultural background you may connect with. Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't even think about that when we started this episode.
Exactly. And that's why I love having you here, because you can reel me in. I get so excited talking about it because, again, as a pharmacist, I know that myopia that we develop, that fear, that concern that everything has to have a set of initials after our name. And that is so freaking not true. I mean, yes, get certified if you want, if you love it, no problem. But to your point, let's say you work in renal transplant, you know something about stem cells, about some kind of specialty, you can weave that in too, or choose not, right? Sure. And yes. So it doesn't have to be as formulaic as we are used to thinking, right? You can take that approach, nothing wrong with it. And there's plenty of opportunities, maybe directly to the patient or business to business. And those are types of things where, if I'm coaching on how to build businesses, that we can talk about. Do you want to work patient to patient, or do you want to work with systems or businesses? Again, what do you want to do? I mean, that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is you can craft what you want.
Within those, Andrea, tell me this, like when you're thinking about the specialties that you've seen out there with all the other patient advocates, when it comes to total addressable market, you and I talk about marketing kind of things often. if you have kind of a niche that is not in your marketplace, then it's difficult to be able to utilize that because you don't have enough patients to be able to pull them in, right? But what things do you feel like in specialties are really broad? Like these kinds of specialists do very well because so many people can utilize these skills in patient advocacy.
So I'm going to step back. The first comment where you said, when you question about the business, if you don't necessarily have enough in it, is that a concern for maintaining a business? It can be, yes.
Sure.
And I would also say, I know a very successful wearable art dealer, clothing. She doesn't worry about having 5,000 people in a group. She has 100 people, but she knows their sizes. She knows what they like, and they come back to her every day.
Yeah.
So you can have a very loyal following of a very small group and be a thriving business leader. But to your point, yes, the aging population, let's be real. I mean, you know, I don't like to use the term silver tsunami anymore. It was brought to, somebody brought that up recently about how tsunamis are incredibly destructive, doesn't carry a good. I was like, oh, wow. It wasn't in relation to what I had said, but, you know, it's a term we see in print. But yes, the number of people transitioning into 65 and older, it's rapidly growing. And so having a background in that, weaving in deprescribing, if that's something you want. I know we have someone here. I have another colleague in the North Carolina area that's a huge proponent and advocate and deprescribes. So yes, that could be something. Substance use disorders. That is something that I think is a huge opportunity for pharmacists to not only be able to speak about the risks and what's going on, and to be able to point people to services. And so I think that that's huge. Behavioral health, mental health. I know that I've talked to advocates who say there just simply aren't enough people out there to help navigate, you know, like the long-term antipsychotic market. You know, just again, we're talking to kind of pharmacists here. But when you think of those, a person has, you know, schizophrenia. They're already going to be facing challenges. Can you help that person get the drug that they need to function, right? So I would say those are the ones I think of. And then there's subsets, you know, transplants, stem cells. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity. And so, you know.
That makes sense. Right in the medical, like you gave a ton of specialties only on the medical side of specialization, right? I mean, and now you've got all the individuals that are helping with travel medicine, or those individuals that are able to travel and take vacations and how you can set them up. Everything from documentation for legal components that oftentimes I think of a law office, a paralegal being, you know, well suited there, but medical practitioners and so many other can do those things. The exact same thing with death planning. You know, you had the death doula that came in and did a wonderful talk with us. That was wonderful. Her name again, Andrea, I wanted to be able to Angel. Yeah, that was fantastic. But being able to deal with that and be able to set people up for success during that phase of life. There's so many like backgrounds and specialties that you don't necessarily have to have training, right? We don't have to have 5 years of didactics in it. You could have
Absolutely not. And there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. I know we're trying to keep it tight here. And so I'm just going to close out on this because there's nothing wrong with starting in the space and then going, wait a second, it's not what I thought it would be. I'm not feeling great with this, or I didn't realize what I was missing, right? And so I talk pretty, you know, openly that I started with travel, health, and wellness. I thought that was going to be my jam. I thought that that would be the space. And then COVID showed up and I was like, oh, crap, this did not go the way I thought. And so when I pulled away, I was like, well, I'm just going to scrap that whole thing. But when I thought about why is travel such a big freaking deal to me, it's because like the call I had another day talking to someone who said, I have a patient who was told, you know, that now has this disease. And I'm thinking, you know, there's no way you're traveling. And in my mind, the travel piece of me was like, just because you have dialysis does not mean you can't travel. And so travel to me is empowerment. It's freedom. It's exploring and living your life, right? And so it was really advocacy all along. I just didn't recognize it. And so now it's one of the legs I stand on in terms of advocacy. It's not the primary, but it's part of it.
I think it's fantastic, Andrew. Wonderful episode. Thank you for just kind of dropping all those wonderful nuggets in there. If you guys want more information on Andrew, make sure that you check her out on the Patient Advocacy channel and join RPHally at rphally.com. Andrew, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say how excited I would be to, I mean, I would just be thrilled to be able to meet y'all. If you're interested in this, reach out to me, join the channel. Send me a DM and we can talk about what this looks like. We offer these programs on the channel to be able to get folks out there to set them up for success. So definitely reach out.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Tschüss.